It's time for another Business Analysis Live. My name is Susan Moore. I'm the Community Engagement Manager at IIBA.
And I'm Scott Bennett. I'm the Manager of Business Analysis here at the International Institute of Business Analysis. Thank you for joining us live today. Today, our topic is effective change management. Susan, have you ever worked on a change that didn't quite work out?
I feel like if I had $1 for everyone that didn't work out, I could be pretty rich. That's how
Yeah,
I know what I know is the ones that didn't work.
yeah, it's very common, and maybe less so in smaller changes, but bigger changes, man, they can be really difficult.
Absolutely. It's and I think as business analysis professionals, we sometimes feel like we bear the brunt of those changes that don't work well. We're going to talk about that today because it really is a big part of what we do as business analysis professionals.
That's right. So we have two guests here today. They're authors of a book that we're going to talk about today, and we're going to talk about effective change management. So let's introduce them. I'm going to add to the stage here, Philippe and Ian. Hello, Philippe and Ian.
Hi, Scott.
Hello, thank you for
Susan.
having us.
Hey, welcome. It's we always love having guests, and especially when our guests have a book because it gives us something that we can talk about. Philippe, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
So I'm a Belgian Europe-based BA. I started out my career as a software developer and architect. Actually, the very first project was hardware development. So I come from a very technical side. But after about 10 years, I decided to move to the other side. And I became business analyst. I was intrigued to find out how you could better prepare for software changes. And then it broadened my view towards everything related to business processes and how businesses are organized. Did a bit of business architecture as well. And then the past few years, I started focusing on anything related to strategic business analysis on the one hand, and innovation, lean startup related things on the other hand. And also moved from project work more and more to coaching and training, public speaking at multiple conferences across the globe. Basically trying to inspire people, which also led to the creation of our book, Brainy Glue.
Yes, and you also work with our Brussels chapter. I know that you're part of the BA Cafe. That is something that they do. So thank you for your contributions to our community. Ian, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, so I'm calling today from London, and I work as Director of Business Analysis for a UK-based company called Peregrine, and we specialise in resource, so BAs, PMs, PMOs, etc., developers, which we work with our clients with. And I've got this wonderful role where I do a bit of coaching, mentoring, and a bit of training, so it's great. I also do a lot in the wider business analysis community, so I don't know whether you've heard of the British Computer Society, the BCS. I sit on the business analysis leadership panel for that. And I've also honoured to have been asked to judge the UK Business Analyst of the Year for the third time, which is coming up at the European Conference, which is in about 2 weeks' time.
Oh, goodness. Yeah. And thank you for all your contributions to our European business analysis community. So where do we want to start? Let's ask some questions about the book. There
Let's
it
pop
is.
the book up here so everyone can see it. Brainy Glue, Making Change Stick. This was a really interesting read. So Susan and I have both read this book. I really enjoyed it. What inspired you guys to write a book like this?
So it was my idea to write a book. I'm sure that Philippe has always wanted to write a book himself, but I wanted to write, I really wanted to write a novel, but I didn't think that I'd be good enough to write a novel. And they always say write about what you know about. So I thought, okay, business analysis. And then I'd met Philippe and shared some ideas, and I've held him in high regard as a business analyst and a business architect. So I gave him a call and I said, do you want to write a book? And he said, yeah, okay. So we got together in London for a week, and we crafted a book. And we always wanted to write a book that's different. So we settled on a novel because of storytelling and the kind of benefits of storytelling.
Okay.
And so we've weaved in about 25 different techniques. Something interesting, my friend said, or colleague of mine, he said once he'd read the book, he said, "Do you know what?" He said, "That's the first book I've read cover to cover since Hungry Caterpillar when he was a child." So that's success for us. But yeah, we wanted to make it different, and we wanted to create some great pictures, some avatars, and just compel people to read it, because we've both got books which we got on the bookshelf and we haven't read them all. Reference books where we pick them up, read a chapter, put them back down. So really, through storytelling, we've created something and added a bit of drama, intrigue, even romance, and definitely some humor. So I'm pleased that you enjoyed it.
So for our audience who might not have heard about this book, it's a storyline that you're following someone through their journey in some business analysis, and there are some ups and downs. It is like a novel. You've got all these characters that play, and you can likely relate to people in your workplace of who the characters are. But I found it very compelling, not just from the business analysis perspective and all the techniques that you talk about in there, but also that storyline. I really understand what you mean by reading it cover to cover, because you want to follow along and see where the story goes and how the challenges get overcome, that type of thing. So I really enjoyed the book. Great job, both of you, in terms of putting this together. I think this is a great contribution to the business analysis community.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it was interesting to see the story emerge from our conversations in London. Some of the best ideas we had added up over a beer, obviously. But like after a few days, we had a wall full of Post-its mapping out the storyline, mapping out the different characters and their behaviors. And then we started creating the different chapters to see how we can have a clear story, because having the idea is just one thing, but you have to start to make it very tangible. And after the week in London, I think we had about 20-something chapters mapped out. In the end, it became much more because we chose to have smaller chapters to make it very light to read, like giving people the idea of just one more chapter. But so the groundwork was done in that week in London, and then it took us only 3 and something years to actually write it.
Wow.
I think this is what everybody thinks, right? Oh, I know this topic. I'm just going to write this book. It'll just take me a couple of weeks or months, and then you realize 2 or 3 years later that, oh, I'm finally actually like I'm getting this thing done. So really, and when you say short chapters, and I also thought this was such an easy read. And it is, you get through with one chapter, which might be just a couple of pages, and you're like, oh, but I have to know what happens next. And so you go on, and suddenly you've read like 10 chapters in one sitting. So it's really accessible. The other thing that I mentioned to you guys is that I could see myself in this. There were, things that would happen to the characters, and I thought, that happened to me. And so I wanted to know what happened. How did this person handle this, because I think it's not attempting in any way to be a perfect story of change. In fact, that's why we're talking about this. So tell me a little bit about how did you decide where you wanted this narrative to go? Like, why did you want to show some of the underbelly of change management, as it were?
So we wanted to make our characters real. Even our lead character, our fictional lead character, Abby Townsend, she's not perfect. She's from a military background, same as I'm in the military reserves. There's a lot of myself in some of the characters, and there's a lot of Philippe in the characters. But we didn't want to make them perfect. And in fact, I'll make a confession, and there's a lot of me in the most boring character that we have. I'm not to say that any boring characters, but the stickler, a lot of the backstory for him and the experience that he brings to the storyline is from my background. So when I was a business architect working in the Old Bailey, which is a courtroom, and the kind of custodial areas, going to Wormwood Scrubs prison and things like that. That's all the wealth that we bring. But we were definitely wanted to develop the characters in a way where we could tell the narrative. So I'll give you an example of that. Abby Townsend is the trained business analyst, and she's got a sidekick called Jane. And through the narrative of telling Jane all about business analysis, that's how we've got, that's how we can tell the story of what business analysis is, and that they share the mistakes that they make, and they learn from them together, and they reflect on them and play it back.
I love that explanation because it's often difficult to explain to people what business analysis is, but in that section where Abby is talking to Jane, it was a really good articulation of, well, this is what I do in this role. And it piqued Jane's curiosity in the novel of, hey, maybe I can do something like that. It was really interesting. So to me, it was a good combination of characters because there was Jane who was interested in becoming a business analysis professional. The main character, Abby, was the professional, and then she had a more senior person she reported to that relayed some advice and some techniques. So it was a really well-rounded view, in my point of view, for someone to pick up this book as a new BA or someone that's been doing it for 20 years. There's something in there for everyone. So I think it was really a good illustration of being able to understand business analysis and some techniques. In fact, there were a couple of techniques that I read about that I'd never seen before. So I was impressed with that.
Yeah, nice to hear. So yeah, we have a lot of experience as BA professional, good and bad learnings. So we were able to integrate many of those in the book. Sometimes it's a small anecdote, like you mentioned, the explanation of what is business analysis. It starts with, isn't it something with computers? That's something that I've heard a couple of times in my life. No, it's not something with computers. We use a computer, but business analysis is so much more. So that comes right out of our own experience. Or one of the techniques is a business case. At some point in time, Ian and I had a long discussion about how lightweight or heavy a business case should be. And then in the end, we decided there was no right answer. We couldn't put a right answer in the book, so that we decided to put the discussion in the book as a conversation between several of the characters, because that's also what we believe our readers will experience, and we hope that they can learn something from that.
Yeah.
But I'm keen to know what's... Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Ian.
I was just going to say, it was interesting what you said, Scott, about it appealing to younger or less experienced business analysts, because it explains what a business analyst does in situations that Abby finds herself in and what she does, not just the techniques, but how she goes about the approach. And we purposely kept the price low because of that, because we thought it appealed to younger business analysts. So that was important for us to make it accessible. Sorry, Philippe.
No, I was just going to ask, you got me curious, Scott, what are some of the techniques that stuck with you when reading the book?
So there was one that I hadn't heard of. Maybe it's in Canada, we don't use this, but the Scamper technique. So we're talking about effective change management, and there are a number of techniques that you share through the book. Why don't we talk about the Scamper technique for a minute, just for those who haven't heard of it, and maybe a technique that they can consider using in their practice.
Yeah, that's one that I share with my BAs when I teach them about creativity and innovation. And it's a technique used, I guess, when you've come up with lots of ideas, you've done lots of ideation, and you reach a point of saturation. And it's a technique, because it's an acronym, isn't it? We love a good acronym as business analysts. and it's a technique that squeezes the extra out. And Scamper stands for substitute, or combine, adapt, magnify and minify, put to another use, eliminate and reverse. And I'll give you a little example of that. Let's say the substitute. Now, I don't know whether you have Mars bar at all. Do you have a Mars bar in
Yes,
America?
We do in the US. Yep.
Okay, so we have it back here as well. And Mars found that their sales were decreasing in the summer. So what they did with the substitute was they substituted the nougat or the nugget part of it with ice cream, and their sales went back up. Yeah, so it's about going through the process of what can we substitute, what can we combine, what can we adapt. Do you know, like magnify and minify. We've all been to all you shouldn't eat buffet or all you can eat buffet and come out really full. But that's magnifying, isn't it? Or you might go to an IMAX, do you know, and seeing a big, Indiana Jones on the big screen, and that appeals to people. So I was going through that process of those individual words to see how you could just squeeze that extra idea out, which might be the idea.
So I think it's from an overall change management perspective, there's a lot of complexity with change management, and I think this book really illustrates that well on a number of different fronts. But if we were talking to someone right now, we've got a live audience that can ask us questions. How would you guys, I guess, as briefly as possible, describe what effective change management is?
So the first question that comes to mind for me is, should we manage change?
Okay.
Because if you need to manage change, I understand it as you have defined the change already with a couple of people, and now you have to manage other people to make sure they work according to the new design, whether it's new software or new process design or new organizational structure. But that it's already, at least that's what we believe, gone in the wrong direction. If you can co-create a change together with a larger group of people, if you can help them using techniques like Scamper, come up with ideas on how to change things, on how to improve things to reach a certain goal that all of you support, then it's not so much about managing the change, it's about making happen what people together believe is a good way forward. And one of the quotes that we mentioned in the book is by Peter Senge: people don't resist change, they resist being changed. So one of the themes of the book is really about how can you bring a group of people together and make something happen. And obviously, you can't have in a large organization, can't bring thousands of people together. So there is also a part in the book about, okay, we've defined this change with a larger group. We're now going to try to bring it, it's a retailer, bring it into different stores. But it's still, the starting point is still how can we co-create this? How can we collaborate on shaping this change rather than defining it in a small corner in the organization and then rolling it out and managing people through it?
Yeah, one aspect I liked about the book was Abby was going into a work environment and she was trying to get people to tell her about the challenges or solutions, and she wasn't able, like people just weren't talking to her. And it really highlighted the people aspect of change management. You really need to be able to connect with people. You need to get people to trust you. You need to get them to participate. So I thought the book did a really good job at illustrating that and making it real for those that have never experienced that.
So that's an example of something from my past. You know, I said that there's a lot of me in David, who is the stickler, and he is the senior business analyst, which Abby struggles sometimes to get some ideas past him. But this is from a real life experience that I had when I worked in the courts and improved the systems. I can't tell too much about the courts themselves, but I say what I can. And when I was trying to implement change, the escorts to the prisoners wouldn't speak to me. They said, look, we've seen people like you come and go. We've told you lots of things, and nothing ever changes. Nothing happens. There is no better work environment after it. I said, well, and then I used all the soft skills that I could muster then, the kind of empathy, and I'd say, look, I wouldn't talk to me if I were you either. That was my starting point. And then the next day they saw me there, and the day after they saw me there. And what I ended up doing was posting. I always work visually, and I posted a day in the life of. And you see two examples of days in the life of, one in the prison service in the book, and they'd start to come up and they'd say, because the thing is, this is the problem, you know, we it's too much paperwork. And I go, okay, let me put that on the day in the life of. And it was in the cafeteria part of where they made their coffees, and gradually they started to talk again, but it was teasing that out. And we brought that into the book because I think it's an important lesson, as you point out, Scott, that when we walk into different domains, different businesses, we can't make this stuff up. We've got to talk to people. They've got to tell us, about of the domain. We are facilitators of change, and not going to come up with the answer if we don't really understand the domain. And it's about presenting it back in a way that they can receive, and then use it to work out what the best solution is, or really get to the root of the problem.
Yeah.
I one of the things that I think this book does really well is because it is more of a day in the life view of change management than just a reference guide that talks about the techniques and things that could be used, for folks that may not have participated in this kind of effort before, or if you're new to business analysis and you're trying to understand what might my day look like, I think this book does a really good job of that. In just in that part of it that Ian, that you just described, I think is a great example. I very often hear from our members who talk about um, feeling like, I'm trying to help everybody, but they won't talk to me, or I've got these difficult stakeholders. One, that is a very normal part of the job for lots of reasons that have nothing to do with you as a business analyst. Um, but it is part of the territory. So I think reading this can confirm, oh, this is normal when this happens. But I think it also underscores the importance of things like building trust, using influence. Like there are other things that you have to do besides showing up with a notebook and a pen and expecting people to talk to you. There's other, we call them essential skills, or you might call them social skills. There's other skills that you have to use in order to, as they say, grease the skids to get that kind of communication and sharing happening with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was one part of the book that I found really interesting. You put a QR code to a YouTube video, and it was talking about the first follower. Can you explain to our viewers what that's about?
Yeah, I think it's an amazing and funny video. So we can often think we have a great idea and we bring it forward, and then we just hope that automatically or automagically things will start to change. That's usually, as you say, not the way it goes. And so the movie of the first follower, it shows someone at some kind of festival or something get up. It's a sunny day, and he starts doing a kind of weird dance, and he keeps going at it. It's weird, it's funny, or maybe not funny. People are first looking at him in a strange way. And then all of a sudden, someone else gets up and starts mimicking the funny dance. And that triggers so many other people to get up as well. And so it's usually not the first person that does something new that gets things going. It's the first follower, because then people see some affirmation of the activity, of the change. And it kind of validates, yes, it's fine. I'm allowed to do this as well. So it's a really fun way to show people the importance of having one or two people that follow you, that are kind of leading the example as a follower for others. And it also triggers me to think about who would be or who could be my first follower. It's, as a BA, most of the time you're kind of on the sideline. But if you have one or two people from the trenches starting to follow your lead, then they become your first followers, and others will start following them as well.
Yeah, I think that the book also sends a message that you need to beware. You might have the best idea in the world. If the first person that comes and says, "No, that's not a good idea," and you shelve it, I just wonder at the enormity of how many of those great ideas have just not been realized because the first one there has said, "No, I disagree."
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that I think not being able to take some of these things personally, when people don't follow you, when people tell you it's not a good idea, we often talk about those kind of essential skills here that you've got to continue on with that change, and you might have to change your perspective on that. But again, I think this gives such a, for those who have never done this, I really think this gives you an idea of the kinds of resistance that you might encounter, and that some of that, you do have to find your allies. You do have to find people that can support you in the work that you do. So I think that it's really great. And one other thing that I want to talk about, because I know there are some other techniques in here, but I think the story itself is an important technique, and that is the technique of storytelling, and how powerful storytelling can be when you want to make something real for people without really being, um, academic about it or overly descriptive, right? If I read something and I can see myself in the characters, or I think, oh, I'm going to click on that QR code. What is this first follower technique? I've never heard of this. It gets you to explore in a way that keeps you open to change at a personal level.
Yeah.
I think there's 2 points to this, isn't there? There's storytelling for a BA. There's the getting your stakeholders to talk, and that's sometimes a challenge. And then you've got to open that door by saying about the worst customer you had, or tell me about your worst day ever, or or your worst telephone call that you had from a customer, or the best, and then that's a way then of them relating to something, not feeling under pressure and saying, oh, this, yeah, I had this kind of person that day, and then there's the telling, giving the messages and the benefits of what you're trying to do in a telling way, not a receptive way. And we give the example of in the book of a tribe in the desert, and they go off on walks, and they got no TV, they've got no radio, as you can imagine. And when they speak, they say that if somebody can't bring a story to life and entertain people, then nobody listens to them, which I thought was fascinating.
Yeah, and it also reminds me of the fact that building rapport is a key element of being a good and effective and impactful BA, and to enable that change. And you can't do that with most people if you just talk about the rational part, the analytical part, about the processes and the information. So if we get people to tell us their stories, also from their personal life, we will start building that connection, and it will make it easier for them to start trusting us and to engage them on the change. For example, I was once with a new client, and I saw some pharmacy utensils on her desk. And it was not a pharmacy, it was a publisher. So I was kind of surprised, but I asked about it, and I mentioned that my mom also was a pharmacist. And so that immediately triggered a conversation, very informal conversation. We got to know each other better in like 5 minutes time. And it's a very good way, because I was hearing her story. I was giving her some ideas about my own story and my life. And yeah, we just started having that connection.
Yeah, it's this that we're talking about, I think, is so important to just the foundation of what we do as part of change management. It's really building those connections, authentic connections, so that people will tell us their stories.
That's
Now,
right. And Susan, we've
speaking,
got some questions coming in.
we
And
sure do. That's just what I was going to say.
and those that are live today with us, ask your questions because we're here to answer them. I'm just going to pop the book cover back up here. So if you haven't read the book yet, I encourage you to find a copy of it. We've got a link in the comments as well, so you can get to Brainy Glue on the website.
All right. So let's take this first question. I think this question really underscores what we've been talking about today. This is from Sweta. How can one introduce change to a group of people or to a department? So, if you are just getting ready for a project, what are the things that you can be doing early to get them ready?
Yeah, so a starting point, referring to what I've mentioned before, is before having defined a change and introducing it to that group of people or department, the first moment that you are getting in touch with people around that idea or project, change starts. Change management or change starts at day 0. It's not something that starts at day X somewhere down the road. It starts at day 0. And if you're aware of that, you can start using your interview techniques and analysis techniques to not capture information and consolidate it and then shape any future design and then present it, but co-create it. And so for me, it's taking that step back and initiating the conversation on what might have to be changed and why you might want to change something from the very beginning.
Yeah, it can be difficult, can't it? I remember once when I was up in the north of Scotland, and I was getting the information from them because we were making them redundant. Now that's a tough sell, isn't it? That's
Yeah.
that's the not very nice part of what we do, I suppose. But for me, it's always about selling the benefits. And sometimes the benefits are not a benefit to them, perhaps it's to the organization as a whole. But it's that promise, it's that constant communication. And if it's a tough message, it's an honest message and it's a transparent message. So that's what's important, because the integrity of the BA is paramount, and honesty, that we are doing things for the best of the business.
And that can be hard. And again, this is where sometimes our work really is hard, because we are sometimes the bearer of bad news. But I think, if we've done that work, to bring people to the table, and that you are known for transparent and honest communications, even if you have to deliver something that's difficult, I think you can find that people will listen. They'll have their reactions, but they will listen. Well, let's move on to the next question here. So this is from Paul Kesh. How to make sure that effective change is easily adaptable?
So again, a tough one. I don't think there is a black and white answer, which is why our job will still be relevant in the coming years.
Yes.
There is actually some of this in the book as well. So the organization thinks about introducing a new product, and they are developing the product. It's something they make in-house. It's not something that they just purchase and put on the shelves. They actually make it in the store. So it's something completely new. And they develop a way of working in the first store, and then they have to expand to other stores. And that's where the traditional change management, if you will, comes into play. But so we're discussing with people, or we're showing the conversations with these different store managers and store staff on differences between different stores, different customer types, for example. People that have lots of money or little money, people that are in an area with more sportive people, for example, near a fitness center. And they come to the point where they see certain things that need to be fixed because of the way an organization works, and other points of freedom where different stores can adapt the way the product is produced and sold and marketed to their store, their customers. So finding that middle ground, I think, is a key element where business analysis is absolutely invaluable.
Oh, I like that idea, because I know we've been talking about, people having change done to them, but yeah, how can we help find the parts of that solution that can be customizable, so that people that are responsible for incorporating that change feel like they have some flexibility, some decisions that they can make about what they do. That's that sweet spot of change management.
Yeah, so we introduced our hero, I suppose. We've got a heroine and a hero, and Jack. And we brought him in to give the cause a little bit of weight. And he's quite a charming character. I'm not going to give too much away. But he paves the way, really, for Abby by sponsoring and empowering her. I mean, himself, he's got this can-do attitude, and he will just try things out. We talked a lot about the term tryout. I was thinking, is that really a word, to try something and just see how it goes, like a proof of concept? And that was important to us, that we just not just talk about it and nothing ever happens. Actually, just try it out, grab the component parts of the product, and let's go and try and build one.
Yeah, that can be, I think, really powerful when people can give it a try, and the results of that are part of, the results of the experiment get to be part of that change. All right, so our next question here, this one's from Sandy. How do we evaluate and what level of a project needs OCM, organizational change management? So we've talked a little bit about maybe different kinds of projects. That might have been something we were talking about before. But what do you think, Philippe?
I think if you start a conversation around a new idea and you involve some of the stakeholders that either might be impacted or might be able to play a part in creating the change, you will immediately feel whether it's a oh yes or oh no or somewhere in between. And so depending on where in between you are, most of the time it's not oh yes. Oh no, that happens too much, in my opinion. But somewhere in between, you will be somewhere in between. And I guess that's where you can kind of measure what level of change management, or at least awareness of making that change happen, you need in that project. And it might be an interesting exercise to reflect on a couple of past projects and identify the different levels of change readiness or change willingness or change appetite, if you will, to use as a kind of reference, also to then share with project managers or sponsors to say, okay, if we look at this new idea, we feel that it relates in the level of change readiness with this or this project. So that means we need to invest time and money to prepare for it, more or less depending on how ready people are for that change.
Yeah, I think that I guess it depends on how big the project is. So I think that every project would need some sort of change management, whether it's communication, training, floor walking, at the very least, the communication, heralding, this is coming, beware, because there's nothing worse than you come in on a Monday morning and things have changed. Now, whether you need a dedicated change manager for that is going to depend on, or a share of a change manager, that's going to depend on the size of the project, I guess. And if not, then who does it? That's an interesting question. Is it a PM? Is a business analyst best position to do that? I don't know. That's another topic for another talk.
Yeah, I guess really looking at the scale of the impact, how many people it's impacting or how significant it is. In my past, if I've had a whole bunch of people that are readily absorbing change, it's not going to require as much change management as if you've had people doing the same thing for 10 years and it's going to impact their job function and you have to implement a change. So
and I think another important aspect to this is bigger changes are usually much more difficult. So why don't we go easy on ourselves and have more frequently smaller changes?
Good point.
Yeah. And I would say, the bigger projects, the risk of failing because of improper change management, it can be very costly. So I think that's a great point. Let's see. All right. Here we'll take this next question. This is from Tracy, and this is when we were talking about having walking into situations where people may not want to talk to us. That's where this comment came from. So it's hard when they tell you what they think you want to hear instead of what they feel is the problem. And I think this can be one of the hazards that you might encounter with change management when you walk in. What would you say about this? Has that happened? How can you counteract it?
So the first thing that comes to mind is don't just look at what people are saying, but look at what people are doing. And again, if people seem to approve in words what you propose, let them have a go at a small part of the change. Are they applying it, yes or no? Or are they resisting in some way? So I think that will at least help you understand, did they really mean it, or are they just trying to stay in a positive connection with me, for example, because they feel their job might be threatened otherwise or whatever. So I guess that's maybe a way to kind of better understand the situation.
And we've got plenty of tools to unearth this, haven't we, as BAs? You've got a wealth of tools, like you can run through scenarios and say, well, how would you feel in this scenario when you've got this type of customer that comes through with these requirements? And that would then help you tease out some things which they can't possibly say that they're happy with.
Yeah, good one. So offer different opportunities, different solution options, and see how they react to different ones.
Yeah. Kind of on that note, maybe this will be our last question for today. This is questions from Pushkar. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. That's that saying. Can change be customized to the culture of an organization? And I guess I'll add to this. Can you embed change as a way of operating in an organization? So change management as being the operational norm.
That's the utopia, isn't it? To get to that place.
Yeah.
To get that place where everything is BAU, I suppose. Wow, what a concept that would be. I mean, you can't do that. I mean, big infrastructure changes need the project and need the control around it. But as Philippe keeps advocating, small change is better, because you can go the wrong way and then just reconnect and go the right way.
Yeah. And if you tell exactly what people have to do and how they have to do it, in many situations they will do what they have to do and they will do it how they have to do it, regardless of whether it's good or bad. But if you make them responsible and give them ownership over a certain objective at their level of influence in the organization, then they might be triggered to come up with interesting changes themselves. One of the organizations I've worked for has always had a very strong culture of everyone in the organization, literally everyone, is expected to propose ways to improve the way we work. And it are often very, very small practical things, but that's, I think, an essential part of a culture for a future-proof organization. And maybe
That's
also with BA, we sometimes tend to overanalyze into the details instead of handing it over to the people, guilty as charged.
yeah, true.
Yeah.
Oh my
Well,
gosh.
I think that one thing that really stands out for me, Susan, too, is change management, from my experience and what I'm reading through the book, is really about experiences that build up so you get better
Mm,
at it. I don't think you can read any theory and be good at this because
yeah.
there's so much the human element. And what I love about the power of this book is it gives you a view into someone's experience, start to finish, and you pick up these little lessons that you would never experience unless you've done it. So you have to practice and practice and practice to get better. But this book gives you some insight to sort of level up your game, I guess you could say.
I think this book comes as close to learning about the kinds of things you might experience on a change project as as you can get to actually doing it. So if I really think it's such a great read because of that. So that's my plug. We can put that testimonial maybe on the back cover of the next edition.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Brilliant.
So, Philippe and Ian, thank you for joining us today. It's been a wonderful conversation. I hope our audience has enjoyed it. And why don't we wrap up, Susan, by telling us, our audience, what's happening next?
My goodness,
Thank you,
September
guys.
is gonna. Yes,
Thank you.
thanks you guys.
Thanks for having
Uh,
us.
So we're actually going to see you next Wednesday. We have another guest, Laura Brandenburg. We're going to be talking about building transferable skills. You may think you don't have what you need to be a business analyst, but I think Laura is going to tell us that may not be the case. So we'll see you next Wednesday, same time. See you then.
If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, and we'll leave another one right here for you to help you in your business analysis career. If you haven't subscribed to the IIBA YouTube channel yet, you can click over here and click on the bell icon to get notified every time we publish a brand new video.